It's welcome everybody to the Tiny Desk Adventure with Shaylyn Potter.
Hello.
Hello, and I'm so excited to have you. I'm always excited. We always know that that's my baseline, but I am really excited.
No.
Okay, thank you. But I hope you guys got a chance to watch her polar diving video, which I think was amazing. I've had loads of comments on the video. People have loved it. I just like that you balance out, telling us a lot about what it's like, what it takes to do it, but also at the same time, I just like that you always have a bit of fun thrown in. It's kind of how I roll. So that's really awesome. So I think we can dive right into some of the questions that I've got. That was not intentional. I promise. Okay. So I've got a list. It's really long, but it doesn't have to go on forever.
I'll just talk really fast. It's fine.
Yeah, so do I. So I think we'll be fine. Half time, right? Like we'll be okay.
Yeah.
Lots of people saying hello. So hello back to everyone. We've got Shaylyn here. We have to turn sideways to see what they say, but that's okay. You've got like wave hands on your eyes. I don't know if you can see that.
What I've always wanted. It's great.
All right. Okay. Let's roll into this. Okay. We're gonna start up. A really interesting question is, what do you have to do to become a polar diver? That seems a little extreme, and I feel like you probably had to do some extra training and stuff. And can you give us a quick walkthrough?
Yeah, so I've trained. I'm a dive instructor, so I did my dive master training and then my dive instructor training. You wouldn't technically need that to be a polar diver. It helps. Any extra training you have, your confidence in yourself and your skills and your just diving skills like buoyancy increase. But then the main training you'll need is dry suit training, because of course you're diving in a dry suit versus a wetsuit. And since there's air in it, it's affecting your buoyancy quite greatly. And so you need that training to be able to use the extra gear. It's not terribly extensive. It's something everybody can do. But yeah, being comfortable in dry suit is the biggest challenge.
So what's the difference? Can you tell? I mean, I think everyone here, anyone who's joining in, particularly from this part of the world, is who dives will dive in a wetsuit, but you use a dry suit. So can you just tell us, like, what's the difference between a dry suit and a wetsuit?
Yeah, basically the function in the name. So in a wetsuit, you get wet. So it's a really thick neoprene, water layer comes in, and basically the wetsuit's allowing you to just heat one layer of water, and then you're not losing more body heat. But a dry suit, you have seals around the neck and wrists or gloves on, so you stay dry. And so I'm able to wear clothes underneath. I wear a lot of layers. But then you have an extra hose from your scuba tank that'll come into a valve on your suit where you can add air, because as you go down in the water column and the pressure increases, you'll need to add air.
Okay, so I have to ask you, right? Serious question.
Okay.
Wetsuit divers may not want to admit it, but most everyone pees in their wetsuit, right? Okay. To keep warm, maybe. I don't know what it is, but that's kind of a standard. It's such a joke. But with dry suit diving, right? You're down there for like 45 minutes and out. There's all that pressure and stuff like that. Can you pee?
No. Well, I mean, you can if you
want.
No,
not into your wetsuit.
Yeah, I mean, you can pee whenever, but no, I've never had to. In case of an emergency, I would, I guess. But no, you're wearing clothes. I'm wearing a lot of clothes. I definitely don't want to pee in it. It did take a little bit of getting used to. For whatever reason, as soon as I feel cold water, I immediately want to pee. That subsides. I don't know. I guess you get used to it. I've trained. I have fluid limits, so I'll try to drink a lot of water early in the day if I'm going diving, or hydrate a lot the night before. And then don't drink a lot of fluids before I go. Just little sips before I get in. But usually when I get I've had times like running to get out of the water. You're like, unzip me, I want out.
But that's exactly the point, right? Like, I mean, I think it's fascinating because wetsuit diving, we talk about diving, but these different categories, they have their own like pluses and minuses. I mean, tropical diving, sure, it's easy. It's, wetsuit, some weights, you go down, if you get desperate, you know, you can pee. I guarantee every diver that I know has peed in their wetsuit, right? Like that's standard, even though they'll look at you and look into your eyes and be like, nope, never. It's you never want to use a rental wetsuit for that reason. A hot tip there. But I mean, on the other side with dry suit diving, right? Like you literally, and I mean, the thing is, it is a natural tendency. That's the point, right? It's got to do with cold. It's got to do with pressure. All of those things. It makes you want to pee, right? And then on top of that, you're wearing more. I know this is not exactly where you thought this conversation would go.
Very important, yeah.
But I want people to realize, right? Like, and then the amount of weight you have to carry because you've got air in your wetsuit and you've got all these layers and whatever. I mean, also, can you tell? Okay, so let's say if you were diving to whatever 30 meters or whatever in tropical water versus if you were doing dry suit diving, like how much weight would you carry? Can you give me a rough approximation?
So if I dive in skins, like in warm water, if I'm not wearing a wetsuit, I just dive in like a rash guard and some swim shorts. I don't wear any weight. I just with the scuba tank, I can dive. And then that's compared to the 30 pounds I'm wearing with the dry suit.
Right, exactly. So it's a huge, the process of getting ready for polar diving, cold water diving is huge, right? So everyone who's just tuning in, I'm having a conversation with Shaylyn Potter about underwater diving, right? And I mean, polar diving underwater, obviously that's how you dive. But, so I'm also curious, right? So it's quite niche, right? Polar diving. Like as a woman, what's it been like to try to enter the field and kind of be a polar diver? There's few spots, I'm sure, for people to go into these places to dive because of the expense and also just the ecological footprint of trying to fly, everybody trying to get out there, all of that. What's it been like for you?
It's been all right. My first day on the job, it was so funny. I got hired with the company I'm working for now, and I show up on the dock the first day, and I'd given them, my dry suit size and everything. And one of the captains comes very, very proud that they had this new dry suit for me. And they're like, look, we got you this new dry suit. And it was a men's small, which is massive on me. And they're like, you said small. And I'm like, I'm a women's small, not a men's small. Yeah. There's some differences in just the physical aspect of it. The gear is quite heavy, and I have to make a couple more trips down the stairs or into the boats than some of my male colleagues, or just me physically being able to carry so much gear. And I get cold a little easier than maybe some of my counterparts, but you find ways around it. I haven't found that to be very limiting. Get a heated undersuit, make a couple extra trips. That's fine. The biggest thing I noticed are comments from people, not negative. People, are supportive and encouraging. They just seem very interested in me diving. And one of the most common comments I get when I introduce myself as the diver, and they'll be like, whoa, well, you don't look like a polar diver. So I don't know what they're expecting to see.
Yeah, what does a polar diver look like, right?
It's like, well, how many other polar divers do you know? Like, how many have you seen? I imagine they're expecting someone like bigger. I don't know, maybe male. And I think you get some stereotypes about the dry suit not looking very flattering. I think people are trying to make conversation. Or if I'm wearing makeup and I don't take it off, or I go diving and they're like, oh, you put makeup on to dive. Just, I don't know. A lot of kind of under the table comments, but overall, I've found it to be an okay career to enter in as a woman.
And so two things. One thing is for those of you watching and who know how small I am, Shaylyn is smaller than me. Just for perspective, when she talks about having to carry extra gear, the weight of gear, it's quite a lot. But anyway, that's not the point. That's not important. How much is not important. But the point being that just so people can get a sense of like, carrying that much gear, like, yeah, right. Smaller, it doesn't matter how strong you are. I mean, obviously size plays a role, right? But obviously your attitude is, I can do it and nothing's going to step in the way. And I think that's the difference, right? It's that attitude that people start to see, and then they stop questioning because they're just like, well, she's doing it. So it's
Yeah.
fine, right? And yeah.
I was just say, one of the best examples I have, we have a rinse like bucket on one of the ships, and it's quite high on me. It's almost up to my chest. And so for me to get my scuba gear in there, I have to kind of like squat and then, lift up. I don't want to use my back and just pull it, So I'm trying to like use my legs, but then I see my male counterpart come over who's, over 6 foot tall and just like, dick.
Yeah.
And can like pull it out. And I went to get mine out. I usually get in the tub after I drain it, because I don't want to like lean over and pull on it and like hurt my back. So I get in, and so I can squat and lift it over. And so just
but it's workarounds, right?
Yeah,
that's what you have. And I mean, I want to point out to everyone actually, we have a resource pack, or just a little bit of extra things about our guests, our little tiny desk adventurers. And on that, there is a link to a video about polar diving. There's a great video that Shaylyn did because of this perception of, how unflattering the dry suit is and stuff like that. And she did it with a friend of hers, and it's fun, it's informative. It just reminds you that, like, even as a woman, this is not a field that you can't go into. There's workarounds, and in anything you do, I mean, whether you're male or female or wherever you come from, like, we are all having to adapt to a certain situation based on our unique sort of whatever our unique situations, right? Like, that's it. So I think that's just the right attitude to have. I'm curious, what kind of cool creatures have you seen on your expeditions?
Oh, all of them. They're all really cool.
Favorite. Okay, this could go on.
I have a lot of favorites. It's all my favorite, but I think it's interesting to see things like marine mammals and seals or penguins underwater. But my recent favorite this season has been the sea spider.
Tell us more.
Yeah, so they're not true spiders. We'll call them pycnogonids. They are related to spiders. They resemble them quite strongly, where they get their common name, but they live in all oceans, but in Antarctica, they can get the biggest. They can be up to 2 feet, the size of a dinner plate, just massive.
Is that the body? That's without the legs, is it?
The whole thing, not just the body. Yeah, but I just find them really interesting. And so now it's been kind of my goal all season to go hunting for different species of sea spiders. They blend in really well with their surroundings and the algae growth, so they're often difficult to spot. So it's a bit of a game to go down trying to find different species and trying to pay more attention to the details and small differences in things, and kind of lock your eye into seeing those differences versus just taking in the big picture of the surrounding ecosystem, trying to focus on new small pieces. Has been really interesting.
That's cool. So Naduni has said these spiders sound scary. Are they?
No, no, they're cute. They just kind of crawl around. I got really interested in this year. I had somebody who was traveling with me who really loved them, and so we shared a lot of stories and knowledge about those. And it's like, I need to try to find more. And I saw one on a dive this year, and I saw its feeding tube out. It's a proboscis. It's like this big tube that can be actually longer than its body, and it's beautiful to see. And I'd never noticed one before until I'm actually trying to look for it. And they stick it into their prey, and they are able to suck out the guts.
Whoa. Okay. Yep.
So
don't want to be prey of them. I mean, I think that's one of the things that we also have in common, right? Is that you and I both like the small things as much as we love the big things. I mean, clearly, I mean, everyone knows me as being a blue whale biologist, but let's be honest, I know. But my point being, I mean, whenever we've dived, it's been a lot around nudibranchs and searching for nudibranchs and trying to stay safe from scorpionfish while pointing at nudibranchs, which is a thing to stay alive. But I mean, I think that there is something to be said about like spending time staring and watching in one place as well. And those small creatures teach us that, right? Like the smaller things, because they're not rushing away anywhere. So you just sit there and you just observe, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of how I felt about the sea spiders this year. I mean, I've seen them plenty of times and know quite a bit about them, but until I watched one for a majority of the dive, and I'm really starting to see other behaviors that I hadn't noticed before, and how much more complex they are than I thought, and all their different appendages and how they're cleaning themselves. And yeah, so paying
That's
attention
cool.
to those little details is, yeah, my favorite.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool because now people are obviously super excited about sea spiders, and someone just commented and said they look really cool. So I'm gonna Google it as well. And then there was another couple of questions that came through. One was, can you identify the species of different sea spiders? Is there any characteristic way to identify them?
Yeah, so they'll look, some of them, the species, you can just tell by looking at them. They'll have different numbers of legs, they'll have different appendages, different colors, and a bit shape. I have different ID books. So usually in the field, I can only ever ID things I'm really familiar with that I see quite commonly. Other things, one reason I really like doing the photography, videography, because I'm able to look at it after the fact, and I'm able to say, oh, look, it had that many legs. Oh, look at that one characteristic. And sometimes it's so tiny, and it'd be impossible to notice it in the field in the moment. So you really need to examine the footage later, and I'm able to identify it that way.
That's an absolute fact. Even with the largest, like with blue whales, sure, I can tell the difference between a blue whale and maybe a humpback and whatever. But sometimes taking those images really helps for coming back and making sure there's accuracy as well. And also then we can share it with colleagues, right? And double check that we're making the right statements, because that's the most important fundamental thing in science communication, which is something that the both of us are really interested in, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. There was another question that went through, and I want to ask before I forget, was, do you get claustrophobic when you dive under the ice?
No, so I don't do any diving under the ice sheet right now. That takes quite extensive topside support, where you drill a hole in the ice and you have a lead line, and you need people on the ice for that support. I would like to do that. I haven't had that opportunity. We dive mainly off of rocky shores. Antarctica is a continent. So you find little rocky outcrops and follow the slope down just like I would anywhere in the world. I've had some, brash ice overhead. No, I don't get claustrophobic doing it. I don't get claustrophobic on land. I think, for people wearing the hood, it's 11 millimeters. It's really thick. And so that's going from like even a temperate water hood to the polar one feels quite different. You can't hear very well. It's very tight. I think that's a really hard adjustment for people, but no, I'm not bothered by it.
Someone just asked, have you ever been concerned about a leopard seal chomping on your dry suit?
No, I've been diving down in Antarctica since 2015, and I've never had a close encounter with one. I've seen them in the distance. We see a lot from the boats, and I've heard them calling underwater, which is really interesting. Wow. And I'm just looking like, I hear you. But yeah, no, I've never had a close encounter. I don't know if I'm unlucky or lucky. I think I'd like to. I really want to see them. And when I tell my colleagues that I think I'm unlucky or either lucky or unlucky, they just say, no, you're just due.
You're just due. That makes sense, right? When your time comes, it'll come. It'll come.
So.
But then make sure you get some good footage so that we can all enjoy it.
Exactly.
Right? But if you miss it, then we haven't seen it.
Yeah. It doesn't count if there's no video footage. But they're an apex predator in their environment. So like any predator, you wouldn't go poking at a lion with a stick or anything. So you just respect them and their environment as that predator. And you can try to judge animal behavior. The more you spend time in the water with these animals, and I've been in the water with other seals, and you can, I don't know, it's weird. You can read how they're feeling sometimes, if they're angry or if they're curious or if they're being territorial. So you really have to try to be intuitive of how those animals are feeling with your presence there.
Yeah, and I think that, just as you say, with respect, right? The thing that we always forget, or human beings are very prone to forgetting, is that like the ocean is not our home, right? It's just like if someone walked into your house and started like poking you and throwing things at you, like you'd be pretty annoyed. And exactly. Come on. And you won't react well, right? And so So it's the same thing when we go into the ocean. That's the home of all these other creatures, and really being respectful. And just like you say, you've known that the leopard seals have been around, but you haven't gone chasing after them or whatever. You wait for that moment when it decides to come to you, which is also, I think, a really important thing to think about, right?
Yeah, of course, it's their home. We're visitors. It's always our goal to leave little impact and try not to disrupt the natural ecosystem there.
That's so true. And so someone else had asked, you've dived in both the North Pole and the South Pole, have you?
Not at the pole. So the physical pole, right, would be under ice or on the continent itself. But I've been diving north of the Arctic Circle and south of the Antarctic Circle.
And I guess the question really was, are there any like visible differences, like when you're down there? I'm sure there's species differences, but anything else?
They're pretty similar ecosystems as far as kind of rocky shoreline and kelp go, but yeah, mainly the species differences. It's a similar habitat, so you'll have all the benthic organisms like the sea stars and the urchins and the sea cucumbers and anemones. It'll be different species in the north and the south, but I guess, yeah, just different species. They could survive. If you took one from the Arctic and put it in the Antarctic, it would make it, but they just aren't able to migrate that far.
Yeah, that's true. And probably not find their mates, and then there's no next generation.
But yeah, one of the big things, there's no sharks in the Antarctic, so you have the Greenland shark up in the Arctic, but it's just not able to make it down that far south.
Cool. So if anybody is interested in knowing more about the Greenland shark, we did a series called Ocean Creature Feature, which you can find on this page, also on our website.
Nice plug. Okay.
Yeah, sweet in there. And we did one on Greenland shark. Greenland sharks are amazing. They're the oldest vertebrate in the ocean, so definitely check that out. I'm not going to tell you more because I'd like you to watch our video, obviously. So other questions. Do you prefer the North Pole or the South Pole? Do you have a preference? Are you biased in any way? Are there species that you'd rather visit in one place than the other?
I like the Antarctic. Yeah, I don't know why. I've just kind of taken to it there. It's really fascinating to me. I don't know if it's because it is so remote and it's harder to get to, and it feels a little more wild. And I just like being there in the ice and the continent itself, and all the time I spend above water doing things as well. So yeah, I prefer the Antarctic.
Fair enough. I've not been to either. Some of us know that I had a slightly disappointing story when it came to the Antarctic. But one day, I'm due, right? That's what we say.
You're due, yeah.
Oh, there's a question. Have you ever seen an owl?
Not underwater, but from a boat. Yep. We see quite a few. Yeah. No, I have a photo. I have a photo of a tusk, kind of. I mean, it's a really, really terrible photo, but you can see it, and I'm like, look, that's my narwhal photo when I saw it in the tusk.
Oh, I love that. There's another quick, bioluminescence in polar waters. Have you seen bioluminescence?
I have never, I don't know about the Arctic. I've never seen it in the Antarctic, but yeah, it'll exist. You'll have those planktonic organisms that Gabrielle was talking about, creating the bioluminescence. And some of the creatures at depth, the deep sea animals, will use bioluminescence as well, like the colossal squid.
That's so cool. And yeah, thank you for linking this back to our previous Tiny Desk adventurer, Gabrielle, who's really into plankton and talked about bioluminescence. So if anyone's interested, the live Q&A recording is on the website, and you can go check out, and she tells you even how you can find bioluminescence and check it out in the ocean, right? So I think that's really cool. I'm gonna switch environments a little bit, but just talk about your favorite species, the blue glaucus. Right?
Yeah.
And the reason I want to bring it up actually is I wanted to bring it up at the start, but then got so excited about the polar diving stuff. But the blue glaucus is known to basically go and suck on the stinging tentacles of the Portuguese man of war. That's like what, 50, 60 times its size, right? like much bigger. And that to me, like, I feel like I like to ask my guests, how do you identify with your species, of your favorite species? But I think I know how you and the blue caucus are similar. You both wait, brace yourself, this is a compliment, okay? But I think, you know, it's the fact that like no challenge is too big, right? Like, I mean, that's what it is. Like, you've adapted, you figured ways around. The blue caucus has mucus in its mouth, so it doesn't get stung by the stinging cells in the Portuguese man of war that could be terrible for other species. But you kind of have the same thing. You figured out like, how
saying, to get stung. You're saying I'm similar because I have a lot of mucus?
Yeah. Well, I didn't quite say that, but if that's what you want to imply, take from what I've said, that's great. But I mean, it's great. I think it's amazing that, you know, you are doing all of this stuff. I really appreciate that you're here to share this stuff with us because, you know, we live in tropical waters. The vast majority of people in Sri Lanka don't even interact with the ocean in a recreational way, right? So don't really know what's underneath. And on top of that, you've taken us to a completely different ecosystem. And there's very few people in the world who've ever got to go to these places. And it's such a privilege, right?
It is, yeah, absolutely a privilege. I think, yeah, like I think I told you in my little fact sheet, that's what I'm most thankful for, is just the privilege to be able to go to these places and do this job, because I understand that it's not something that everybody has the opportunity to do.
Yeah, and I think it's always good to have gratitude, no matter what you're doing, right? And recognize like where you are and how, but at the same time, we mustn't discount the hard work that goes into it, right? Like, you took a leap of faith, just like you said in your little fact sheet. Like, you took a leap of faith. You were on a career path that was more stable, but you quit that to take this on, and you went off and you trained, and then you kind of had to prove yourself too. So I mean, for sure, like, there's a level of privilege, but there's a hell of a lot of hard work that we sometimes discount, and I don't think that's fair. But you do this videography, and I think everyone would have seen like the beautiful images that the videos that you included in our video, apart from the amazing videos of you in your polar dry suit, which I was like into it. But why videography, and like what took you down that path, and why do you think it's an important tool for you?
Yeah, I'm not, it wasn't a very, I didn't really mean to end up on this path. I didn't say I want to do this and then try to make that happen. I kind of stumbled on it. After I finished my dive master certification, I was just looking on the website, the PADI website, trying to find jobs. And they had one for an underwater videographer in Curacao, and it was no experience needed. They would train me on all of their equipment. So I applied, and then I just went. And so that, I mean, you're just having to, just kind of close your eyes and leap. I just bought a one-way plane ticket with my scuba gear and a little backpack of clothes, and they were like, yeah, we'll just pick you up at the airport and take you to this place where you'll live and work. And I said, okay.
And I mean, sorry, keep going.
No, I mean, that's just, it kind of led me, on from there. But I've always been a biologist. I've been more interested in animal behavior and how the ecosystem is working together. So I think then using that videography to help show others that, especially like animal feeding behavior or certain things they're doing that, you can say, oh, the sea cucumber feeds on plankton, but like can't picture what that looks like. And so being able to show people that, I think, has been a really powerful tool in education and of course conservation. So yeah,
absolutely. I think it's a great message actually that your story tells, is that sometimes you do have to take that leap of faith, and there are very convenient paths that you can go down that are well tested. But if you really want to sort of challenge yourself and do something that you truly love, sometimes it is about taking what a lot of people might think is a risk, right? Like quitting a job and then going off, and you're like, and also trying new things, right? Because we're all works in progress, right? So you were like, okay, go down this diving path, and then you're like, oh, underwater videography, like, let me try this and see what it's like. And I think that you can never like underestimate the power of trial and not necessarily error, right?
Yeah. Yeah, because you don't know where to lead. I guess you just have to go for it, and it kind of unfolds from there, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And you got to try. If you don't try, you just never know, right? So when you're working with your camera gear, now I'm just imagining you, right? Like we saw the video, you've got a lot of gear on, right? Like how do you manage? This is such a silly question, but how do you manage the gear? Like, you know, when you're underwater, I wear gloves just because even in tropical water and very thin.
I remember, yeah.
You remember, right? Okay, let's rub it in. I'm really bad with the cold, especially when I'm driving. But the point being, you know, that it's also protection. But whatever, it helps, you know, like you got this glove and it's a layer between you and the camera, but you wear really thick gloves and you're already like puffed up in your outfit. Like, how do you manage your gear? Is it complicated or?
It's pretty complicated at first. You definitely get used to it. I don't really think about it anymore. I guess by now it's easy enough. I remember when I was first wearing neoprene gloves and I thought it was really difficult, but now I just kind of progressed from there. And we wear dry gloves in Antarctica. So it's worse than the neoprene because you have a layer of air. You have your gloves to keep your hand warm, and then they fill with air, and then you have your dry glove on top. I try to set up the camera mainly before you go in. You know, you have the settings in mind that I want to use, and all the camera housings have buttons and stuff on the outside. So you try to just be prepared before you go in, so you're not fiddling with it so much, because it is hard. It's hard to change the lenses. So I'll try to minimize doing all of that. But yeah, you get used to it, just like anything.
Yeah, I mean, it just sounds so cumbersome, but you're right. Like, I guess
it is, yeah.
Yeah, but like you've obviously got a system, right? Like you say, you set things up so it's at the best possible settings that you can imagine will be necessary when you're gonna dive, and sort of try to make it work from there. What is the scariest dive you've ever had? Someone wanted to know.
I've luckily not yet been in any situation that I felt terribly in danger. I've heard a lot of horror stories from colleagues. I think the sketchiest dive I've been on, and it wasn't that bad, but I was in Bali, and it was like a wall dive, but it was a flat reef, and it had a really steep wall, and a strong current ended up coming over it, and a strong down current to where my bubbles were going down. So really, really strong down current. And I broke a fin. So I had one fin, and we ended up having to climb up a little bit. You know, you try to find holds along the wall. But yeah, I guess, you know, you're trained for a lot of these situations and how to, you know, hopefully appropriately react and stay calm. So yeah, hopefully that I don't get into any bad dive situation, but.
Yeah, and I guess that, you know, we asked you, and that's on the sort of the resource sheet all about you, the 3 traits that you felt were important for you to do the job you do, your personal traits, and you definitely, you know, stated one of them was just the ability to be calm and collected, and that's so important, right?
Yep. Oh yeah. Well, because you know, you're at potentially 100 feet. And if something happens, you know, if the regulator free flows, or, you know, maybe a leopard seal that's really curious comes over to you, maybe it bites your hose. I mean, there's so many situations, but it's unlikely. But there's always potential for these things to happen at depth. And so, you know, a lot of your training is fighting natural urges, because if you lose your mask or your breathing device, a bit naturally, you're going to want to be at the surface, but you have to be able to use better judgment, knowing that you can't make that decision. You can't just go for the surface. So like, okay, how do I problem solve from here? So I think that is a lot of the dive training, and how, if you don't really have that in you, I think you don't progress to be a professional diver. You just don't, because you have already learned that you're not able to solve those problems in that way.
That's true. Yeah, so we'll have another guest coming on, Darshana, who's a Sri Lankan cave diver, and the first Sri Lankan cave diver, and technical diver, and he's discovered a lot of shipwrecks. And I think that's one of the traits that has also helped him. So that'll be good to join up these conversations based on that, right? Like, because a lot of these jobs, I think, I think when we showcase them, they focus very much on the beauty around us and what we're seeing, and almost because it's edited, right? The ease of with which you're seeing all these creatures and stuff, which is really unrealistic. And there's so much training, not just training on using equipment and stuff, but there's the physical training we have to maintain at some level, and then also the mental training, right? It's the constant. Yeah, exactly. And I think
I think I saw you, and we talked about, I told you confidence, I feel is really important. But especially in this profession, because of the dry gloves, you can't rely on your sense of touch. So like if I'm in tropical water and I want to reach for my knife for whatever reason, I can look, I can use my eyes, I can see it, I can feel it wherever I have it attached. But when I have my dry gloves on and I'm in all of this gear, I'm not relying on those senses. I can't feel, and it's harder for me to look around with my hood on. And so you have to be really confident in your training and your gear that you know where to grab things. So if something happens, I know where to grab my second regulator if I need to. I know where to reach for my knife. It all has to be a bit muscle memory, and I have to really trust that I'm going to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's true. And the confidence comes from just constantly doing these courses and training and practice. But of course, you have to do the training and stuff like that, which is incredibly important, right? And people always wonder, like, what do you do in your dive training? And that's exactly what I tell them. I said, you're not doing anything out of the ordinary. It's just trying to get comfortable in case something were to happen,
right,
to be able to get yourself safely out of that situation. And just like you say, someone accidentally kicks your face and your mask comes out, or your regulator falls off your mouth, right? That's your breathing, right? And so you panic and you can suck up water, or you might try to jump up, like swim up to the surface really fast, which is really, really bad and dangerous. So it's that being able to be like, okay, you know what, this has happened, I got to get back on. And
and just knowing I've been well trained, I know how to problem solve in this scenario. So being able to think through the steps, kind of like this, and this, versus like panic.
So okay, so there's another question. You dived, and then your dive is done. What does it look like when you come out? Like, what do you do next?
Oh yeah, it's sometimes it's awful, because you come up and it's really uncomfortable on the surface for me, because you've just come up and then you inflate your BCD and then it starts pushing up, you're on the surface kind of like this, and then you have to get on the boat. We don't have ladders, we just jump in. And so then, and you're cold at this point, you've just finished, you're kind of exhausted from being on the surface, and so you have to unclip all your things with your hands that are kind of cold, and then take the gear off, and we have to help push our boat driver will pull, but we're trying to like push it up as well. And then you're left with your weights on. So then I'm trying to hold on, to the side of the boat and take my weights off and hand them up. And then you have to jump in. So usually when I get out of the water, just take a couple breaths, I usually am quite exhausted. And if you got really cold, maybe if I didn't wear enough weight or I didn't wear enough layers, my hands will get really cold. And I call it the screamy pukies. It's that moment when your hands rewarm. When they're cold, they don't feel that bad. But as the blood comes back into it, it's so painful. And so I usually tell my dive colleagues, like, just do not talk to me for like the 2 minutes after we get out and I rewarm. Like, I am not pleasant. Like, you cannot reason with me at all. And so I'm just sitting there trying to breathe through it. And then it passes and you forget. And then
you just get it. So there's another question from Jan. How much time do you leave between dives, or can you dive as needed? That's a great question, I think, actually.
So the same as basically worldwide, our dive tables are the same globally for depth and time at bottom and your surface intervals. So we follow all of those recommendations from the Navy dive table. but we follow them all a lot more conservatively because the water is cold. We're really remote. We're a day or two away from a decompression chamber if needed. And yeah, you just always want to err on the side of caution in those situations, and cold water will be harder on your body. So yeah, we dive much more conservatively than we would elsewhere, but we follow all the same recreational diving limits.
Yeah. Okay. So just as a quick brief for people who aren't familiar with diving, even if we do tropical diving here in Sri Lanka, we'll dive. You always do a deeper dive before. If you're doing 2 dives, say you'll do the deeper dive first and then the shallower dive. Between your dives, you have to stay at the surface for an X period of time. That's calculated. There are tables that can do it for us. We also wear dive computers that can do the maths on how much time you need at the surface to get rid of all that extra stuff from your blood, right? Nitrogen and stuff like that. So there's a process of patience. Even when you dive, you can't just shoot up to the surface. And we did mention that, but probably to clarify, you can't just shoot up to the surface when you're done with your dive, right? You're like, oh, I've been on the bottom for 30 minutes. I'm kind of bored. I'm just going to go back up to the board. Yeah. That's really dangerous because there's nitrogen buildup in your blood, and you want to make sure it goes out of your blood before you come up to the surface. And so going up is this slow process, and the deeper you go, the slower you have to go, and the longer. There are certain levels at which you stop and you wait, right? So I can imagine in polar water, you do have to think about this so much more, right?
Oh, yes, I usually do 2 stops. I'll do one at like 15 meters, so kind of a mid-water stop from our deepest depth, and then I'll do my standard safety stop at 5 meters. But I usually extend that. So, you know, the recommendation's 3 minutes, but I try to save like 5, just find some things. But that's hard to plan because, you know, in cold water, usually you're okay and then you're cold. But my mind's thinking about other things. I'm filming and this is so nice. And then all of a sudden I'm like, wow, I'm really cold. And now it's going to take me like 6 minutes or more to, you know, just do my safety stop and come up. And so, and those last minutes are, I don't know, seem to be really intense as you're getting colder. So the 3-minute safety stop at the end can be awful. So usually, but I'm exaggerating, you know, a little bit. It's not awful, but usually I try to plan for that. If you're starting to get cold, knowing that you better start making your way up.
And also the other thing is, when we think about these safety stops, right? We know they're mandatory. They're important for us to function properly. And it's in polar waters, obviously you have to manage cold as well, but you also have to manage the air in your tank, right? So you can't just suck up all the air in your tank on the dive because it's such a gorgeous dive and there's all these manta rays and there's all this stuff happening. You have to constantly pay attention, look at your dive gauge, look at how much air you have left. And so focus and concentration is a really important tool as well in diving, right? Like it feels free, it looks free. People are just like kind of swimming around in these beautiful places, but you're in charge of your own life at that point. And, and you have a buddy, you dive with the buddy always, and you kind of have to make sure you're looking after each other, but still at the same time, like it's so important for us to remember to stay focused on just survival, right?
Yeah.
All this
Yeah, I'm really good on air at this point. You know, that comes with training as well. And the tanks are massive for me. I prefer smaller tanks. So yeah, I'm never really limited by the air in my tank, but I do check it. I have to make it a habit still to check my gauge just in case something happens, because it's really easy for me to get out of the habit of doing that and get complacent. You know, I've done it so much that things start to slip a little bit, you know? So I have a lot of really hard rules, I call them, for myself that I have to follow. And I never let myself kind of slip past those, because I know, like, once I'm like, oh, it's probably okay. And it's just, slippery slope.
One slippery slip, right? That's all it takes. How long, I'm curious, like, how long does it take for you to put all your gear on and then take all your gear off?
So too long. So usually, gearing up, I give myself a half an hour. You can do it a lot faster. I don't like to be rushed. And then just, you know, getting the camera. I set the camera up before. But yeah, putting all the layers on, and especially if I'm going to wear a heated vest. So trying to hook up all the wires and put the battery on the tank. And there's been plenty of times where the gearing up process took longer than the dive was, because there's always, I mean, water gets into places it shouldn't all the time. You know, I'm actually surprised that the dry suits keep you dry as often as they do. But it's not uncommon for us to, you know, jump in the water and somebody's suit is flooding just immediately, and that's it. I mean, that's the end. So you went through this whole process of picking a site and, you know, getting the boat and getting all the gear and getting dressed, and you roll in and that's it. So that's kind of the hard part, because, you know, then you're all wet. You can't really just, it's not usually a quick fix sometimes, but yeah, not all the time.
Wow, sounds intense. Okay, so just if anybody has any last questions, we're gonna wrap up really soon. But I always also like to draw parallels between myself and my guest, apart from height parallels in this situation. And I love the nudie branks.
I was gonna say, yeah,
cute. But I also, you know, as I read your bio, you know, you said that you were fiercely curious and collected insects, and that's exactly what my childhood looked like, right? Like I tell people, you know, kids had dogs and cats, and my family, we just had caterpillars and grasshoppers and scorpions and like all in our bedroom, right? And we would make domino mazes for our caterpillars, expecting them to walk along these. I don't know how, but I mean, I think that's what we still hold within us, right? That absolute love for just all these weird and wacky, wild things out there, and that appreciation for this, and also just the fact that we have that curiosity, right? That doesn't slow us down. It hasn't slowed down. No one's told us you have to stop being curious and ask questions, which is really nice, right?
It is. You want to hear my most recent pet? A black widow.
Oh yeah, okay, that's like a regular pet. Everybody's got a black widow, right?
Really
like,
cool. Yeah.
That's
but
like,
it was found it in the house, and I couldn't let it go because there was snow outside still, so we just kept it.
Oh yeah, I think that's a good idea. Do you know, Sri Lankans may not know what a black widow is, and may not know just how cuddly it is, you know, keep it with you when you go to sleep at night, right? It's one of those, right?
Yeah. And we feed it things. She's the queen. She takes down much bigger spiders than herself, so she's a keeper.
She's a keeper. She also kill you potentially, but that's cool, right? Okay, so there's one other question about what's the best way to get a foot into scientific diving? Do you have any thoughts and recommendations?
Yeah, you know, you just take the courses. It's the best way to start to get into it. They have scientific diving courses, or a dry suit course, or an underwater videography course. It's kind of hard, you know, they do cost quite a lot to get into all of these trainings. You can sometimes on different websites find, maybe you could trade, you know, do like workaways. So trading your services, working at a dive shop for training. But yeah, I think that's the best way, because once you are in those classes, you're meeting people who are doing the same thing. So you've met an instructor or multiple instructors and other people who are doing similar things. So making those connections is really important. But it's often hard to find that. Like, how do I find other people who want to do this type of diving? So outside of like a club or that course, it's going to be difficult to find people who can help connect you different places in the field.
Yeah, and I think that's also great advice, right? With anything you do, it's like you do have to go into spaces where there are other people doing the same thing, because those people can be your network to go and find out and learn and meet other people and get connected. And like, you know, we always say it's not what you know, it's who you know, right? Like there is a level of that, but who you know doesn't have to be what you inherited from who your parents knew. It really is about the connections you're creating. And I want people to remember that distinction, because I think very often people are like, oh yeah, but she can only do it because her father is so and so or something, and it's not the case. Like, who you know is really who you build relationships with, and that's really key as well, is about relationship building, right? Like, that's so key. Like, I mean, we're friends, right? Like, I mean, look at us. We've actually taken out some National Geographic student expeditions to Bali. One of our students is here. Ella's in the room, actually, watching.
Hi, Ella.
So that was awesome. That's awesome. But you know, it's relationships, right? We didn't really know each other before we started. We had stalked each other on Instagram, right? I think a little bit of that going on. And then we finally realized we were on the same expedition, taking these kids out to in Bali. And it was great. Like, we hit it off, which is good, because small spaces, small groups have been horrible if we didn't. Yeah, small people. That's right. And then we did that 2 years in a row, which was nice. We looked forward to that. This year, obviously, nothing's happening, so we don't have any plans to see each other, but hopefully that will happen, which would be really great. In person, not just like this. Okay, I got it. Oh, that's a shame. We've got one sad person whose scientific diving class was COVID canceled. It's okay. Just know that everything is COVID canceled at the moment, but your chance will come. And the fact that you have already picked that first step is probably a good, big positive, right, Shaylyn?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. And like you said, yeah, I think people make their own opportunity. So just introducing yourself to people and just kind of being open, like, I'm really looking to do this, and asking your friends and colleagues and connections if they know any leads. Because oftentimes, you know, I'm like, oh, I'd really like to do this, but I don't know where to start, but somebody does know where to start. And so just trying, make your own opportunity with those connections.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we're going to wrap up now. This has been fantastic. I've really enjoyed it. Just so you all know, if you missed any part of this or you want to share it with friends, it will be up on our website very shortly, oceanswell.org, where we have all our Tiny Desk adventures, their initial videos, and then the Q&As. We want to use this opportunity to really introduce you all to some of the most incredible, I think, passionate kind of ocean heroes, to show you the wide variety of what's possible in the marine environment. So you don't think that you can only be a marine mammal person or a coral reef person. There's loads of other ways to get involved in marine science. And I think Shaylyn would really like to agree. Oh, we got someone from Peru. We've got a bunch of people from different places in the world. I think there's definitely India, the US. Amazing talk. You're getting high fives and thumbs up and hugs. We'd give you real hugs, but we can't, because it's virtual, but also because we can't right now. So that's that. But I want to leave the audience with, maybe I want to ask you one question that I can leave the audience with. And it's basically based on a question that I just saw coming through. Clearly Antarctica is a space that you love, and it's inspired you. What do things about Antarctica inspire you?
The ice. I love the ice, the huge tabular icebergs. There's nothing quite like it. I think it can be really extreme, but it's unmatched in its beauty. So I think I don't want to like give it human characteristics, you know, and call it like wild or feisty, or, you know, but it can change really quickly down there. It's beautiful light a lot of the time. So these really stunning colors on the ice, but it can change very quickly and be a really harsh environment. So I like that polar aspect of it. And I don't know, I guess it just still seems so unexplored to me. It's hard to get there. And, you know, as far as why I like diving there, I think there's a lot of unknowns. And for me, I usually on every dive will see a species I've never seen before. And for me, that's super interesting. You know, if it's the same species again and again, I got to a point in the Caribbean where I can basically name everything I see. But when I'm diving here, I don't know what to expect. It could be, you know, rocky bottom, silty, maybe I'll find whale bones. Who knows what I'm going to find? But there's always something new. And after every dive, I have to go digging through books, trying to ID what I saw. So for me, yeah, it's kind of that exploration part of it. And it's just always different.
Yeah, I can imagine that. I hope one day I'll get to go there. Not sure about the polar diving aspect, since we all know I get cold in tropical waters when I'm diving. But just because I think it's such a uniquely different place to the spaces that I'm really used to. And I think there's definitely power in being able to witness that firsthand. So that it's been awesome. Obviously, it's been awesome talking to you. Beyond everything else that Shaylyn does, she's also an amazing entrepreneur. This is a buff. So you put it around your neck. I wore it at the initial stages of this whole thing, because I didn't have a mask at hand, so I could wear this as a mask for my face. It's called a buff. The company's called Salty Threads, and I don't really know how things are going in terms of distribution. But if you ever are looking for really cute, these are also made. I mean, she lives in Oregon. They're made locally, so really sustainably in terms of supporting the local people. But also these are unique designs by artists, and I think this one is so stunning. I've had lots of compliments, by the way, Shaylyn. People have seen it on my photos and they've been like, oh, where'd you get that? And so I thought I'd just put that out there. Okay, with that, I want to say thank you so much to everyone who came into the room. We are going to put this out there just so that more people can just engage with this amazing material, this conversation. I hope you've enjoyed it. We will be releasing our next Tiny Desk Adventure on Wednesday with Vanessa Beasy, who talks about turtle arribadas, and I would suggest you also watch that. In fact, I'll suggest you watch everything. You're in? All right. I like
look at all my things.
Yeah, just watch everything 25 times. All right. With that, I want to say thanks so much, Shaylyn. I know you stayed up. Yeah, we also on your fact sheet about you, the first thing you do in the morning is snooze your alarm, and the last thing you do at night is angrily set your alarm for the morning. I know what you're like as a morning person. I've had that experience. Therefore, we scheduled you for a time that you would be in good spirits.
Yeah, so, it was well planned. Yeah, it's good.
So well planned. All right, with that, thank you so much once again. Thanks everybody, and thank you so much,
Asha.
Nice
Thanks
to see
for watching,
you.
everyone. Bye.
Bye.
How do I get out of here?